One. How's it going, everyone? Before I hear, welcome to Heliopolis Radio. Today, we've been fortunate to be joined by Carmen Theobald. Apologies there for the slip up. Carmen is the founder of Horse Sense North, and basically, what they do is they offer recuperative therapies for first responders and people through, I would presume, horse riding and many other activities. No?
With horses, but there's no riding.
There's no writing. Okay, so there's no writing part,
Mhm.
but yes, she's here to share about how that process works and how it's rejuvenative to our psyche and how it helps us deal with some of our own inner issues that we may be facing. So, Carmen, without further ado, I hand it over to you. Tell us about yourself. What is it that you love to do? And yeah, I can take it off from there.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Mufaro. I so appreciate being on your podcast and connecting with all of your listeners. I have a little bit of a throat thing today, so if I have to take a little pause to cough,
No,
excuse me.
no worries at all, right?
Um, Thank you. Um, yeah, I am super passionate, and I would even say obsessed with horses, because I've just done so much of my own growth and healing with them. And I've worked with thousands of horses in my life. So the other hat that I wear, other than doing my work at Horse Sense North, is for the past 15 years, I've been a farrier. So I've taken care of horses' hooves. I'm like a foot healthcare professional for them. And I've worked with thousands of horses in that way. And just like us, right, when we think about doctors and their patients or, clients, everyone has their own various backgrounds with challenges and very often trauma. So when I'm working with these horses, maybe they're in a lot of pain, maybe they don't feel safe, maybe they don't feel seen or heard, or like they can lean into any kind of trust in our relationship. So learning how to develop safe, healthy, and effective relationships with them where I can still get my job done
Mhm.
has been the most intense and important learning of my life. So, as I've learned to do that with them, it's all about relationship. How can I show up in relationship with myself? And how can I show up in relationship with them? So, as I did that and continue to do that, it's a lifelong learning process. I wanted to really learn how to become a bridge builder between the worlds of horses and people so that others can have these kinds, not in the same context. I don't want to put anyone underneath a horse to do that hoof job as well, but to have transformational experiences with them where they can really be in the role of our teacher and our guide because they're so attuned to what is going on within our body, in our nervous system, and in our heart. So they really invite us into this world of authenticity and of healing through that embodiment and connection.
Wow. And so I guess you basically did it on. So what is Force Sense? And you already started to elaborate a bit more on it. But what does interacting with the horse, how does it help the human person develop an understanding of themselves? How does it help us understand more about our personal psyche and our nature? If I worded
Mhm.
that correctly.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So if I were to personally define horse sense, this is maybe not probably, I highly doubt the one you would find anywhere else. But for me personally, what horse sense means is three human things that, of course, horses have too. But if we were to translate into human language, it's clarity, connection, and courage. So, how can we develop more clarity about what's really going on within us and around us? That includes with the horse, in our surroundings, and of course, what's happening in our own body, in our mind, with our emotions, all of that kind of stuff. Can we develop more connection with our own heart and open up to others in that way as well, assuming it's safe? Or exploring if it's safe. Sometimes we don't know unless we're willing to kind of take those first couple of steps. And courage. We need a lot of courage to actually do that. To listen to our heart can take a lot of courage.
Mm.
To connect with others, especially when we've had a lot of experiences where connection does not feel safe, can take a lot of courage. So I feel like those three things can really facilitate a lot of growth, development, and healing for people and horses. And any animal really, but especially for humans, we're so used to living with these masks on. We're so used to living in a way that our culture or society dictates that we should be. And the horses invite us to get back to what I like to refer to as our mother tongue, which
Mm,
we all have in common no matter where we are, no matter what language we technically grew up with. We're all speaking that language of the nervous system, of being in our body, of recognizing our body's changes and needs, and attuning to others in our environment or not. And
mm,
so that mother tongue language in our nervous system, in our body, whether we're feeling safe or not safe, to reconnect to that and allow that to really guide us and also help to heal some of those patterns that have been ingrained in that place in us. Um, I think is one of the biggest gifts that we can do for ourselves and what the horses can really help us with.
wow, so beautifully said, truly. And so I was going to ask, when did you decide to start the program? And what is, I mean, you already mentioned it already, but I guess just again for further elaborations so that people kind of understand it fully, what is the core essence that you want people to draw from the program? And what type of activities do people get to participate in with the horses? I know horse riding is very dangerous, so I can imagine why you've probably not included that because there's a certain training and everything that has to happen around interacting with horses in that manner. But what type of activities do you encourage people to participate with the horses, and how do these activities connect you to the animal itself and help you understand it as well?
Sure. So I'm going to answer your question in kind of two parts because we offer some horse sense, if you will, with and without horses. So without horses, I will work sometimes with teams and organizations going into their place of business, or sometimes we do it online, or sometimes they'll even come here, but not actually directly having that work with horses. Same thing with individuals, not necessarily part of an organization. I might have some online coaching. I might do some group work. Offering some of these horse inspired pieces that are very relatable as humans, but maybe a little bit of outside the box thinking from our very solidly human mind, and allowing some of that horse inspiration and even horse inspired frameworks. So I have like a leadership model, for example, that I'm certified to train people in and teach people, as well as my own kind of spin off of that for self leadership. So from this horse inspired nature based lens.
Mm,
So we can do a lot of that learning without directly being with the horses. And if we do have an opportunity to actually work directly with the horses, that can happen with an individual session. So someone coming for 2 or 3 hours. And there's always a human to human component, and then there's a horse human component. So even within the horse experiences. Yeah.
no, no, sorry.
Did you want me to stop?
No, 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 continue. Sorry. My bad. So I
Okay,
live with
no
my family,
problem.
so there's interactions that come in. My aunt just wanted to ask a
Wonderful.
question. So I had to give her the thumbs up, but then I don't think she got the signal.
Excellent.
So
No problem.
human experience.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So even for people coming to spend time with the horses, excuse me,
No problem.
even for people who are coming to spend time with the horses, there's always a human to human component. So we always do some kind of like preparing as people, and then we go and practice it with the horses. But it's not like practicing like an obstacle course or practicing like A plus B equals C kind of thing. It's always an exploration. It's always, let's take what we just kind of discovered and learned together and explored in our human lens. And then let's actually embody it with the horse or not. And that's okay too, because there's no pass or fail. There's no, we did it right, we did it wrong. It's just, can we show up in authentic, mutually respectful relationship with this horse in this moment? And that's why I have the work on the ground. Yes, riding can be dangerous. I am a rider as well. I do it as a pleasure thing for myself. And my insurance would go up if we did riding. However, it's not that reason that we don't want to do that here. It's really because when we have the horses on the ground and we don't have any halter on them, like so there's no restraint on their head. They're at liberty, they're free.
Hmm.
So yes, we're in an enclosure with them, so there is some containment, but they really have a lot of space to move around, to choose to be with us, to choose to not be with us. So they have their full voice and choice in how they are engaging in relationship with us. And so we get the most authentic moments with them that way. and also the most magical moments, because when we have that ability to really land inside of ourselves, find
Mm.
that place where we're connected to our heart, where we're able to be present in the moment with them, and actually start to sense each other again with our mother tongue, so to speak. Now we get to really feel what it's like to be in relationship with them in that kind of way.
I really like that element that you mentioned, really about taking away the writing component. Almost what you do is seems that it's about embodying freedom without any type of restraint and kind of bondage, forceful bondage upon anything. I think that's really because, a lot of interactions that we have with wildlife enclosures here, we have certain retreats where you can go hang out with lions and different, different animals for that matter, probably more on the wild side, not as domesticated as horses, obviously. But I do notice that your interaction with the creature is kind of hindered because of how you're interacting with it. You're forcefully putting it in certain situations and you're not actually having that natural connection that you talk about. I mean, for what it's worth, I really do appreciate that. That is the reasoning behind that. That's very sincere. That's comes from a deep place of compassion and care for the animal. So, yeah, my respect for that. And I don't know if you'd maybe like to speak upon this to whatever degree you'd want to. How have horses helped you overcome your own emotional traumas? And um, yeah, I'll start with that question.
Sure. And thank you, Mafaro. I appreciate that a lot. Um, and I think the horses do too. So, yeah. Um, I'll share a little bit more of my background of how I got into this, but I also want to just give your listeners a little bit of an activation or trigger warning, because sometimes a story is a little bit difficult or a lot difficult for some to hear. I won't go into too many details, though, so just so people know.
Mhm,
So I grew up in Montreal, and I was actually studying social services at Dawson College. So I was already really drawn to working with people in some kind of helping profession way. But I ended up leaving school early before I ended up getting my degree. And that was because while I was there was a school shooting that took place.
mm,
And it was a very intense experience, of course. I was one of the lucky people in a sense who left with my life. I was one of the lucky people in a sense who wasn't in the worst of the worst of it. And I was also forced to be hiding in a classroom for 45 minutes,
mm,
not and quite certain that I was going to die. We were hearing the shooter getting closer and closer to us. And the only reason I'm alive today is because of the incredible work that first responders do, and police in particular, on that day. Um, they were so brave and literally saved so many people's lives. So that's part of my inspiration as to why I'm so passionate about working with public safety personnel today. And I can chat a little
mm,
bit about our program after if you want me to, but that's a really important piece for me because I want to give back, recognizing that that was one day for me and they are dealing with stuff like that on the regular basis.
mm,
So I really appreciate having that opportunity to work with public safety personnel at our farm now. It's the most fulfilling work I've ever done. Um, so it's not that I felt scared about being back in school, and that was the reason I left. It was that I felt when I left that situation and I got outside and I had been escorted out with the rest of my class secretly out this back door.
mm,
I got outside and the sun was shining and I felt the air and the warmth on my skin and I felt more alive than I ever had felt before. Not in this like super adrenaline way. I'm sure there was tons of adrenaline too, but more
mm,
in the sense of I have this life. What am I going to do with it?
mhm,
And this life is truly my own, and life can be so short.
mm,
So, what is the most important thing for me to do with this one precious life? And it's not that all of that kind of came super clearly in the moment, but it was that feeling and that kind of kept building. And I just got more and more in touch with that little voice inside of me that I think many of us, myself included, really quiet and make tell it to kind of shut up sometimes, very often, right? That heart connection to ourselves of what is our heart actually telling us. And because we're trying to fit in with the pressures and expectations of whoever, of society, of ourselves, our doubts about what we're maybe capable of, we ignore that voice. And I think I probably would have ignored that voice for many, many more years before I really found the courage to listen to it. But that experience kind of shocked me into making more space for that voice. And so that's what led me to leave school, because I realized I just really needed to be out of the city and follow this draw, this calling to be closer to nature. And if there was a chance to be near horses, even better. So that's what led me to go volunteer on a farm. I thought I was going to be there 2 weeks. I ended up being there almost 2 years. I ended up getting my apprenticeship through that experience as a farrier, so that taking care of horses too. So that's kind of how it all unfolded that way. And it's through my farrier work and working with horses on the farm and all of these experiences with horses that they just kept bringing me back to myself in that way. That experience with the school shooting, it kind of, almost with electric, shock pads when they try to resuscitate someone. That's almost like what it felt like
Mm.
with my heart. But I have to keep working that muscle. I have to keep working that muscle of courage to dial down the pressures and the expectations and the doubts so that I can keep listening to my heart. And the horses help me keep strengthening that muscle to do so.
Powerful, powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. People can only imagine how difficult of a journey. Um, people come out of situations like that, and it goes a whole different series of directions because it's very, very difficult. But just the level of clarity that you achieved from that experience is incredible. It's remarkable, actually. It's almost short of a miracle. So thank you for sharing that. And I guess maybe this question is more on the, I guess, psychological side. Um, Peace and forgiveness. Um, what has that journey looked like for you? I know that's a very maybe loaded question, but to simplify it, I feel like just after reading into your story, to go through something of that nature, it obviously changes your perspective on the world and people and things and situations. But just even listening to you speak and how much love you have for what you do and how you've managed to cultivate it, I can tell there's a certain element of peace and forgiveness that's been found within yourself. And perhaps someone else who tunes in may be going through some circumstance that is maybe different of a different nature or similar. Perhaps even just hearing how you managed to somehow maybe not fully get there, but are getting to a place of peace and forgiveness within yourself. Yeah. How does that process look like for you?
Hmm. I love that question for lots of reasons. And I think it's important to share something else about my background before I kind of give a answer to it. To be honest, Mufaro, the that incident in college didn't have nearly the same traumatic impact as growing up in a home that felt deeply unsafe,
Mm,
where I wasn't experiencing physical abuse, but there was a lot to do with daily living that was deeply unsafe emotionally, psychologically. And that kind of complex trauma, that kind of day over day wearing a person down in lots of different ways, that's harder for me. And I think a lot of people. It's interesting to kind of read some of the research with this as well, especially when it comes to, soldiers and people, first responders. I work with a lot of therapists and some who really deeply specialize in this field. And very often, not to minimize the intensity of that, the combat or not, or the incidents that might happen that are terrible and deeply, deeply traumatic and violent, that of course scars people. And And the way that we're, the more sometimes subtle or overt ways or experience where the home base actually feels not safe. And so we actually can call that sanctuary trauma or
mhm,
betrayal trauma, where the
Mm-hmm.
people and the situation, whether it's a house or an organization, a lot of first responders deal with this, where they deal with terrible things out on the road and then they come back to their place of what should be their sanctuary, what should be their home base. And it is not a culturally safe environment for them. They are judged for mental health challenges. They are judged for having a tear,
Mm-hmm.
um, where there's actually a lot of toxicity and aggression between peers and all these things, leaders, instead of building people up, tearing people down, all those kinds of things have deeper impacts very often than the actual incident itself. So I'm saying all this because when you ask about peace and forgiveness, the first thing that comes to me is about boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So when I have good enough boundaries with my situations that caused me harm, because the situation at college, it came and it went. And of course, it lives in me in some ways. And again, I'm not minimizing the extreme experiences that some people have, that they're having those flashbacks and all those things. And the way that we heal from those individual incidents where they come and they go is having that community, that sense of safety, that sense of connection with healthy people and healthy environments. So if we're not in with healthy people, if we're not in healthy environments, accessing that peace and forgiveness is kind of a joke to me,
Mm-hmm.
because how can we possibly expect anyone to heal and access a place of peacefulness inside and understanding that deep compassion for others, even when they do terrible things, to understand and really have that full picture of like, we're all human or people or beings that have valid reasons for being the way they are. It doesn't mean it's okay, but they
Mm-hmm.
have valid, understandable reasons when we have that trauma informed lens. But to ask people to have that kind of wider view of who someone is, to have even a space for forgiveness to come in, we need to have the boundaries first to
Mm-hmm.
stop being harmed by them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a huge part of my own journey as well, is to travel into my own life without those pieces anymore.
Wow, powerful. Again, thank you for sharing it as intensively as that is. There's a lot to take from that. I think that, anyone who undergoes trauma understands pretty much where you're coming from in that regard, and it takes courage and conviction to assert boundaries. Definitely, if you're a compassionate person, you tend to live with minimal boundaries ultimately because you want to be able to include people. It's inclusivity. It's a part of our human nature to do that. Animals do it better than we do. If you think about how much we abuse them, make them do certain things, and ultimately they can do nothing about it, but by their nature, they're still welcoming. So it's
Mm.
quite interesting just how that kind of goes. But I was going to ask, how do people reach out to you? And what type of workshops do you offer to people, I presume, outside of, because I'm based in South Africa, yeah, but perhaps someone from wherever in the world who listens may just want to reach out to you. Do you have any online programs that you kind of run for people outside of Ontario and Canada as a whole, and North America for that matter?
Yes, so all of our online offers are accessible to anyone worldwide. We actually have a 5-week group coaching program coming up starting this week. So I don't know when you're airing this, so it might be too late. Excuse me. But we run things like that on a semi-regular basis. So if people are interested in learning about those opportunities as they come up, they can head over to our website, www.horsesensenorth.com, HORSESENSENORTH.com. And you can sign up for our mailing list at the bottom of any page. You can also check out other things that we have going on. We have a self-guided online course that is that horse-inspired self-leadership program. So it's called Beyond Self Care. People can sign up for that at any time. Sometimes I integrate that into programming that we're offering. For example, the group coaching that's coming up, we're going through the self guided, but then having some live calls that go along with it. So there's flexibility for people who are from far away. And then of course there's online coaching. So if people want an individual or group coaching with some horse sense, so to speak, then that's what I offer too. And then as far as our in-person work, you can learn more about that on the website. There's some videos, and we have some public workshops that people can sign up for. Um, and majority of the work we do is either private, so people are setting up like a private workshop for themselves and a friend or something and
Mhm.
traveling, or um, part of one of the first responder programs that we're running.
No, no, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I will make sure to put the links in the bio and also on the side screen in the video so that people can hopefully, look into it. And I think it's something that everyone probably needs to do, particularly in the world we're living in, so much adversity people are facing now. So connecting with nature, connecting with animals that have lived harmoniously with it more than we have, for that matter, I think a lot of people can take some benefit from that. So also ultimately wishing you the best with the program and extending it to wherever it needs to go. But I know moving forward, definitely what you do on the farm, it'll be of value to people. So thank you for doing that. And the last question I was going to ask is, any words of wisdom or advice for any listeners today?
Hmm. Well, I think I'd love to kind of circle back a little bit to what you were saying about boundaries and being compassionate people. And it this is one of the pieces that the horses have continued to teach me in really important and powerful ways for myself. And I think this is where I want to share with your listeners.
Mhm.
When we are stepping into our power in healthy ways, we learn how to be compassionate with ourselves and others at the same time. And that when we're only compassionate to one or the other, it's not really compassion.
Mhm.
So when we learn how to access our power in ways that are maybe creative and still very kind, but where we can be strong and vulnerable at the same time, where we can be gentle and powerful at the same time. And the horses really invite me and everyone they work with in this kind of way, especially, but I think always, to embrace their non predatory power, if you will, where they
Mhm.
really understand that vulnerability is strength and they really understand that we all matter and that we can show up from that place in our heart.
Wow, incredible. You should be the podcaster. You should be running the show. You have the wisdom for it, and you have the gift of speaking it. There's definitely there's a lot of compassion and kindness that is emanating from what you say. And so thank you so much, Carmen, for coming onto this show. It'll be great, to have you on again if time permits in the future, see how things are going, what new projects are on the horizon. Those are always good. But ultimately, thank you for coming and giving your time and sharing a lot about yourself, which is not easy. Again, some of these questions, a lot of people, shy away from them, but you answered them in such a way quite dumbfounded myself, and also sharing what you do. I can tell that it's a good thing. There's something to it that is really special. So just wishing you all the best moving forward with it. And again, thank you for coming onto the show.
Thank you so much, Mufro. I would love to come back one day, and I'm so grateful to all of you who are listening, and I hope to connect at some point.